Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're going to be exploring some really interesting ideas about the global economy.
Ideas that might just challenge how you see the world.
Yeah, exactly. You've brought us some excerpts from Jose Antonio Vizner's book, Lo que la economía esconde.
Yeah?
And honestly, it's a bit of a wild ride.
It is a wild ride. Vizner doesn't hold back at all.
So are you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, so first things first, paint the backdrop for us. What's the overall scene that Vizner is setting?
Okay, well, imagine a world on the brink of a massive power shift.
Okay,
Not just politically, but like economically.
got it.
Think technology's racing ahead, climate change is rewriting all the rules, and you have all these simmering tensions between nations and different
Right.
economic models. That's the world that Vizner's describing, and it's full of surprises.
That already sounds like the plot of a thriller movie.
Yeah.
So who are some of the key players in this economic drama?
Well, Vizner argues that we're essentially entering a new Cold War.
Oh, wow.
But this time, it's not just about ideologies. It's a clash of economic models.
Interesting.
So on one side, you have the U.S. and Europe representing, that familiar capitalist system, but they're very heavily reliant on debt.
Right.
And on the other side, you have China of Russia,
Okay.
who are building an alternative model
Got it.
where they're aiming for energy dominance and a world that is less dependent on the U.S. dollar.
So it's like a high-stakes game of chess with the world economies as the pieces.
Exactly. And Vizner suggests that the war in Ukraine is actually a symptom of this larger economic struggle.
Okay.
He argues that China benefits from the conflict by getting cheap energy from Russia.
Right.
And at the same time, Europe's dependence on the U.S. is weakening. They're scrambling to secure resources elsewhere,
Interesting.
like that lithium mine in Extremadura, Spain.
Hold on, a lithium mine in Spain. How does that tie into a global economic power struggle?
Well, so Europe is pushing hard for electric vehicles,
Right.
but they're heavily reliant on China for the components.
Oh, okay.
That mine in Spain represents Europe's attempt to become more self-sufficient,
Okay.
to break free from that dependence on China. It's a microcosm of the larger battle for economic independence.
That's a really interesting point. I never would have connected those dots.
Yeah.
And speaking of dependence, Vissner talks a lot about the U.S. dollar. What's his take on its role in all of this?
He reminds us that the U.S. dollar is the foundation of the current Western economic system,
Right.
but it's a system that's built on a mountain of debt.
It's like we've built a house of cards and the wind is starting to pick up.
That's a great way to put it, and naturally other countries are noticing this shaky foundation.
Yeah.
China and Russia in particular are working to de-dollarize their economies.
Okay.
They're accumulating gold reserves to protect themselves from U.S. sanctions and potentially undermine the dollar's dominance.
So if the dollar is the king, gold is making a comeback as the rebel leader.
You could say that, and it's not just about powerful nations maneuvering for advantage.
Right.
Think about a country like Argentina. Vizner argues they're trapped in a cycle of debt and crisis because they're beholden to that dollar-centric system.
So what you're saying is the dollar's dominance has real consequences, not just for governments, but for everyday people.
Absolutely. And while Vizner doesn't predict an immediate collapse of the dollar, he does raise serious questions about the long-term sustainability of a system built on ever-increasing debt.
Yeah, that's a pretty sobering thought.
Yeah.
So we've got this new Cold War brewing, a potential shift and global currency dominance. Is there anything else we need to worry about?
Oh, there's more. Let's talk about the green transition.
Okay.
Vizner doesn't just see it as a shift to clean energy. He sees it as a power play with huge economic consequences.
Is he saying that it's not really about saving the planet?
Well, he argues that nations like those in OPEC, along with Russia,
Okay.
see the green transition as a threat to their economic lifelines,
Oh, wow.
and that this could lead to more geopolitical conflict.
Okay, so that does make you wonder.
Yeah, and he points to the U.S. pushing for green energy while simultaneously benefiting from fracking, which, as you know, has some serious environmental downsides.
Right.
And he calls that hypocrisy out.
Okay, what else does Vizner highlight as we shift to green energy?
Here's where it gets really interesting. He predicts that even space exploration will likely still depend on fossil fuels, at least for the foreseeable future. He questions the motives behind the push for such a rapid green transition.
Okay.
Is it truly about the planet, or are there other agendas at play?
That's a good question. So we've got economic power struggles, a potential currency shakeup, and a green transition that might not be as straightforward as it seems. What else does Vizner have in store for us?
Well, let's talk about something that's already transforming our world at an incredible pace, the AI revolution. Vizner sees AI as a double-edged sword. On one hand, it has the potential to revolutionize industries, solve complex problems, and even improve our lives in ways that we can't even imagine yet.
Okay, so that's the optimistic view, the shiny, happy side of AI. What about the potential downsides? Everyone's seen those sci-fi movies where robots take over the world.
Well, Vizner doesn't go that far, but he does predict that AI will disrupt employment in a major way,
Okay.
potentially leading to widespread job losses. He even suggests that a universal basic income might be necessary to support those who are displaced by automation.
So picture this. Robots are doing most of the work, and we're all just relaxing, living off this universal basic income.
Yeah, it's a scenario that raises a lot of questions. Vizner acknowledges the potential for a more leisurely society, but he also points out the potential for social control and loss of purpose in this brave new world. What happens to our sense of self-worth when our jobs are taken over by machines?
Right.
Who controls the AI, and how do we ensure that it's used ethically?
Those are some big questions, and honestly, they're a little unsettling. But to be fair, Vizner does provide some concrete examples of AI's potential benefits.
He does. He talks about its potential in medicine, where AI could help diagnose diseases earlier and develop more effective treatments.
Oh, wow.
In the legal field, AI could analyze vast amounts of data to identify patterns and precedents, helping lawyers build stronger cases. And in transportation, self-driving cars could make our roads safer and more efficient.
So there's the potential for good and bad. It sounds like Vizner's saying that we need to be very careful about how we develop and deploy AI.
Exactly. He's not saying that AI is inherently good or bad, but that its impact depends entirely on the choices we make as a society.
Right.
We need to think critically about the potential consequences, both positive and negative, and make sure that we're steering the technology in the right direction.
That makes sense. It's like any powerful tool, it can be used for good or for evil. So on top of all these technological shifts, Vizner also talks about demographics. What's his take on how population trends are impacting the global economy?
He argues that declining birth rates in the West, coupled with an aging population, pose a significant threat to economic growth and social stability. He sees this as a slow-motion crisis and one that's often overlooked in the headlines.
So it's like a demographic time bomb ticking away in the background.
That's the way to put it. As fewer people enter the workforce and more people retire, who is going to pay for health care and pensions?
Yeah, that's a problem I've heard about, but honestly, it's always felt kind of abstract. What are the real consequences for everyday people?
Well, think about it this way. As the ratio of workers to retirees shrinks, it puts a strain on social safety nets. Governments may have to raise taxes or cut benefits, which could lead to a decline in living standards for everyone. It also creates labor shortages, potentially slowing down economic growth.
Okay, so the consequences are pretty significant. Does Vizner offer any solutions to this demographic dilemma?
He does. One idea he proposes a robot tax. The idea is that as machines replace human workers, we could tax those machines to help fund social programs and support those who are displaced. It's a controversial idea, of course, but it speaks to the need for creative solutions as the nature of work continues to evolve.
That's definitely something to think about. So we've got all these overlapping trends, economic rivalries, potential currency shifts, the green transition, the rise of AI, and the demographic time bomb. It sounds pretty overwhelming, to be honest.
It is a lot to take in, but Vizner's point is that these trends are all interconnected, they're not happening in isolation, and their combined impact is going to reshape the world in profound ways.
So it's like a giant puzzle with all these pieces fitting together to create a complex and ever-changing picture.
Exactly, and understanding how those pieces fit together is crucial if we want to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture. What are the key takeaways from Vizner's analysis so far? What should our listeners be paying attention to as they move through their daily lives?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that we need to pay attention to the undercurrents, the forces that are always visible in the headlines.
Okay.
We need to develop a deeper understanding of how the global economy works, how it impacts our lives, and how our choices can influence its trajectory.
So it's about looking beyond the surface, understanding the deeper forces at play.
Exactly, and it's about recognizing that we're not just passive observers.
Right.
We have agency. We can make choices that shape our own futures and the future of the world.
That's a powerful message, and honestly, it's a bit of a relief to hear that we're not completely at the mercy of these global forces, but it also raises a question, what choices should we be making? What actions can we take to shape a more positive future? Does Vizner offer any guidance on that front?
He does. He suggests a few key areas where we can focus our attention and our efforts. The first is education.
You mean like going back to school?
Not necessarily. He's talking about a broader concept of education, one that focuses on developing critical thinking skills, understanding complex systems, and adapting to a rapidly changing world.
So it's about being lifelong learners, constantly seeking knowledge and challenging our assumptions.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual learning. It's about fostering a culture of curiosity and critical thinking in our communities and in society as a whole.
Okay, so education is key. What else does Vizner recommend?
He also emphasizes the importance of responsible innovation. He argues that we need to be thoughtful about how we develop and deploy new technologies, particularly AI.
So it's not just about creating cool gadgets. It's about ensuring that those gadgets serve humanity and don't create more problems than they solve.
Exactly, and that requires us to think about the ethical implications of technology, to have open and honest conversations about its potential impact, and to develop safeguards to prevent its misuse.
That makes sense, but technology is developing so rapidly, it's hard to keep up, let alone try to control it. How do we even begin to approach responsible innovation on a global scale?
It's a complex challenge, no doubt, but Vizner suggests a few practical steps.
Such as I'm ready to take notes.
He advocates for investing in research and development that focuses on ethical and sustainable technologies.
Okay.
He calls for greater transparency and accountability from tech companies, and he encourages governments to create regulations that promote responsible innovation while still allowing for creativity and progress.
Okay, so it's about a multi-pronged approach. Investing in the right kind of research, holding companies accountable, and creating smart regulations. What about individuals? Is there anything we can do on a personal level to promote responsible innovation?
Absolutely, Vizner believes that each of us has a role to play.
I'm all ears.
He encourages us to support companies that are developing ethical and sustainable technologies, to vote for leaders who prioritize these issues, and to engage in conversations about the ethical implications of technology with our friends, families, and communities.
So it's about aligning our actions with our values, supporting the good guys, and raising awareness about the importance of responsible innovation.
Exactly, and it's about being informed consumers and citizens, making conscious choices about the technologies we use and support.
That's a lot to think about, and honestly, it's a bit daunting. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of these huge global trends, but I appreciate that Vizner's message isn't one of despair, it's one of empowerment. He's saying that we have a choice, that we can shape the future we want to see.
He is, and I think that's a crucial message to remember. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the complexity of these issues, but ultimately it's about individual choices and actions multiplied across millions of people that will determine the course of our future.
Okay, that's inspiring. But before we get too carried away with all this talk of shaping the future, let's circle back to one key aspect of Vizner's book that we haven't explored yet, the future of money. We talked a bit about the potential decline of the U.S. dollar, but what else does he have to say about what our financial systems might look like in the years to come?
Well, he explores a few really interesting possibilities. He spends some time discussing the rise of cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, Bitcoin, it seems like everyone is talking about crypto these days. What's Vizner's take on it? Is it the future of money?
He sees Bitcoin as a potential challenger to the dollar's dominance, particularly if there's a loss of confidence in the traditional financial system. He even quotes Robert Kiyosaki, who predicts a potential crash in the U.S. dollar that could send investors flocking to gold and Bitcoin as safe havens.
So it's a digital gold rush, is that what we're looking at?
In a way, yes, Vizner sees Bitcoin as having the potential to disrupt the existing monetary order, although he acknowledges that it's still a relatively small and volatile market.
It's certainly a risky investment, but it also seems like it could be a game changer. What about other forms of digital currency? Does Vizner talk about those at all?
He does. He spends a good chunk of the book discussing central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. These are essentially digital versions of existing currencies issued and controlled by central banks.
So instead of carrying around dollars or euros in our wallets, we'd have digital versions of them stored on our phones or computers.
Exactly. And while this might seem like a natural evolution of money, Vizner raises some concerns about CBDCs.
What kind of concerns?
Well, he's worried about the potential for government surveillance and control. If CBDCs become widespread, governments could track every transaction we make and potentially even restrict our spending if they deem it necessary.
Wow, that's a bit unsettling. It sounds like a recipe for a dystopian future, where the government has complete control over our finances.
That's a concern that many share. Vizner argues that we need to be very careful about how we implement CBDCs, and I'm sure that they don't erode our privacy and financial freedom.
So it's not a clear-cut case of digital currencies are good or digital currencies are bad.
Exactly. There are potential benefits and risks, and it's crucial to have open and honest conversations about these issues before we make major changes to our financial systems.
That's a theme that seems to run throughout Vizner's book. Proceed with caution, think critically, and don't blindly embrace any new technology or system without understanding its potential consequences.
You've hit the nail on the head. He's not advocating for a specific ideology or solution, but encouraging us to develop a deeper understanding of the forces shaping our world and to make informed choices that align with our values.
Well, that's certainly a call to action, but it also raises a question, what does that look like in practice? How do we translate these big ideas into concrete actions that can shape a more positive future?
That's a great question, and it's one that Vizner addresses head-on in the final chapter of his book. He lays out a roadmap, a set of principles and actions that can guide us towards a more sustainable, equitable, and fulfilling future.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's dive into that roadmap in our next segment. We've covered a lot of ground here today, but it feels like we're just getting started. All right, so we're back and ready to unpack Visner's roadmap for the future. Where does he suggest we even begin?
Well, he starts by emphasizing that we're not just passengers on this ride. We have choices to make both individually and collectively that will shape the future we create. And he breaks it down into three key areas: education, responsible innovation, and what he calls conscious evolution.
Okay, we've touched on education and responsible innovation already. What's this conscious evolution all about?
It's about recognizing that the challenges we face, things like climate change, technological disruption, economic inequality, these aren't just external forces acting upon us.
Right.
They're also a reflection of our own choices, our values, and the systems that we've created. So conscious evolution is about actively shaping our future by questioning those systems, examining our values, and making deliberate choices that align with the world that we want to see.
So it's about taking responsibility not just for our own actions, but for the systems that shape our lives.
Exactly. It's about understanding that we're all interconnected and that our individual choices have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves.
That's a pretty big concept. How does Fisner suggest we put this conscious evolution into practice?
He offers a range of ideas, but one of the most compelling is the concept of redefining progress.
What does he mean by that?
Well, for decades, we've measured progress primarily in economic terms, GDP growth, corporate profits, stock market performance. But Visner argues that this narrow definition of progress has led us down a path of unsustainable consumption, environmental degradation, and social inequality.
Mm-hmm.
He suggests that we need to redefine progress to include things like well-being, environmental sustainability, social justice, and even spiritual fulfillment.
So it's about shifting our priorities, measuring success not just by how much we consume, but by how well we live, how fairly we treat each other, and how we care for the planet.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true progress isn't just about material wealth. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive both materially and spiritually.
That's a beautiful vision, but it also feels incredibly ambitious. How do we even begin to shift our collective mindset on such a fundamental level?
Well, Visner acknowledges that it's a long-term project, one that requires a fundamental shift in consciousness.
Right.
He suggests that this shift begins with individual awareness, with each of us questioning our own assumptions, examining our values, and making conscious choices that align with a more holistic definition of progress.
So it starts with each of us making small changes in our own lives, and those changes ripple outward, creating a larger wave of change.
Exactly. And as more people embrace this new definition of progress, it will begin to influence our political systems, our economic institutions, and even our cultural norms.
That's a hopeful thought, so we need to redefine progress. But what else does Visner recommend for navigating this complex and uncertain future?
He talks a lot about the importance of building resilience, both individually and collectively.
What does he mean by resilience in this context?
He means developing the capacity to adapt to change, to bounce back from setbacks, and to thrive in the face of uncertainty on an individual level. This might mean developing strong social connections, learning new skills, and cultivating a mindset of adaptability.
So it's about being prepared for the unexpected, being able to roll with the punches and come out stronger on the other side.
Exactly. And on a societal level, building resilience might mean investing in renewable energy, diversifying our economies, strengthening social safety nets, and creating more equitable and inclusive societies.
It sounds like Visner is saying that we need to prepare for a future that's going to be very different from the past, and that the best way to prepare is to become more adaptable, more connected, and more resilient.
He's not suggesting that we can predict the future, but that we can develop the capacity to navigate whatever challenges come our way.
That's a powerful message. So we need to redefine progress and build resilience, but is there anything else we can do to shape a more positive future?
Well, Visner emphasizes the importance of collaboration. He argues that the challenges we face are too complex for any one nation, organization, or individual to solve alone. We need to work together across borders, disciplines, and ideologies to find solutions that benefit all of humanity.
So it's about breaking down silos, building bridges, and finding common ground, even with those who might see the world differently than we do.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that our collective future depends on our ability to cooperate and find solutions that work for everyone.
That's a tall order, but I think it's an essential one. So to sum it up, Visner's roadmap for the future is about redefining progress, building resilience, and embracing collaboration.
That's a great summary. He's essentially saying that we need to shift our mindset, adapt to change, and work together to create a future that's more sustainable, more just, and more fulfilling for all.
That's a powerful message, and honestly, it's pretty inspiring. I think Vizner's book offers a lot to think about, and while some of his predictions are a bit unsettling, he also offers a sense of hope. He reminds us that the future isn't preordained, that we have the power to shape our own destiny.
I agree. It's a call to action, an invitation to become conscious participants in shaping the future we want to see.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave our listeners today with a sense of hope, a call to action, and a challenge to embrace the power we have to create a better world.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep shaping the future.